episode is this? 6? 3, 2, 1. We are recording episode 6, Love and Thunder. Let's start by thanking our sponsor.
What's up, guys? I'm your host, Dave Lipson.
And Camille Leblanc-bazinet. I forgot that part.
And today, we're going to get into some really cool stuff. But first, I want to give a shout out to some of our sponsors and supporters of the podcast, like Nutrex Research, the best sports supplements on earth. If it's awesome, it's Nutrex.
Born primitive. We might be born naked, but they put some sweet clothes on us.
I love your taglines. These are authentic taglines. Cured Nutrition. I'm high as a motherfucker.
It works.
It definitely works.
Perform asleep, sleep good, and do other stuff in the bed, which also feels good.
Okay.
I know, we're going there.
You got some more than me, Cammy. You got a bunch of sponsors. Let's go to the
Red Bull gives you wings.
Does give you wings. Who else are we? Who else are we forgetting? Anybody?
Feroz Fitness, best program out there.
Yeah, that's right. Feroz. If you are fierce, you are feroz. And I don't. Okay, so let's just get into it. All right, we're enough bullshit. We got some really cool
so scared
stuff.
I forgot someone.
We're gonna talk about first some training secrets from veteran athletes and trainers that you may or may not be aware of. These are things that have really helped Camille and I a lot. We're going to get into our top mindset tools, things that you can actually take with you and implement tomorrow on a day-to-day basis to be able to get the most out of yourself. And we're going to talk a little bit about our 10-year wedding anniversary. But first, let's get into...
We have been married for 10 years.
A decade, as they say.
A decade of David.
Boy, that's way too much, David.
That is so much. Yeah. People don't know this at home, but they think like you put an act when you're posting on social media. What they don't know
is... It's a toned down version.
Yes!
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, oh, you're really hamming it up for social media.
Yes.
And they don't realize I'm actually trying to like watch my P's and Q's and not offend people because I am usually out of control.
Yes.
But let's get into...
All right, training secrets.
Training secrets. So for those of you guys out there, I know a lot of people listening to the podcast have been training. They've been training for a while. And chances are they have a decent, what we might refer to as training vernacular, in that they understand a lot of concepts about movement, about exercises. And what we're going to talk about is not necessarily what you're doing in your training, but how you're doing it that can really make a huge difference. So, Cammy, why don't you get into just a little bit about some of the things athletes might consider to get more out of their training?
Yeah, I think like this is just, it's like free education and free to do. It doesn't take more time. It's really just trying to do things on purpose with purpose. And with that being said, for example, you have a certain training to do. It really doesn't take much more effort to just try to be very conscious into how you are doing things.
And before we even get there, though, I think it's important for athletes and coaches to understand that as much as it is training in the gym, it's also education for the athletes to understand, not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it, how they should be doing it, so that they can better hit the bullseye with training. And I think a lot of people, are probably performing some of the same movements, right? They're back squatting, they're deadlifting, they're pressing, they're doing pull-ups, but oftentimes they reach a point where there's just like a plateau. It's just not getting much better, and they keep doing the same thing again and again.
Or they get injured and they don't know why.
Exactly, and you're just like, hey, what's up? I responded so well to back squats before. Why am I not getting stronger or bigger? Or why the number's not getting any higher? And this is where the education becomes important now that you've accommodated to the stress of just doing the movement or just trying to lift maybe as heavy as you can or as fast as you can. This is where training principles really become important. And for me, this has been a huge evolution in my education as an athlete and a coach into understanding principles in training that can really, really help athletes break over a plateau, avoid injury, and keep themselves moving forward. So
understanding the stimulus and intention behind what you're about to do.
So let's just talk about the low-hanging fruit first, which is form. Okay.
Yes.
And one
That's
thing,
exactly what I was thinking.
one thing you'll notice about athletes and coaches that have been doing this for a long time is that they have really refined form and technique. There's not a lot of wasted movement, or the way that they're moving is very intentional to be able to get a result. So let's speak a little bit about form and maybe some of the things athletes should be looking for and thinking about just in general when they're performing movement.
Yeah, I think like there's a couple basic thing that just like happens like 90% of the time, unless you're doing like so, especially I'm talking here about compound movement.
Yep.
Like compound movement, you should like pretty much always have a flat foot on the ground, weight well distributed through it with an arch back. Like if you don't have that, we're like not engaging all the musculature and keeping ourselves like more orthopedically safe, and we're not having the full mechanical advantage.
If I could just, from a 30,000 foot view, just put this out there, good movement looks pretty.
Yeah.
All right. So when you go in the gym and you see.
Oh, did you just ask me a question? Having your own answer in your
No,
head,
because
and like.
it kind of sounds like we can get into the semantics of each movement or what your spine should
Oh
be doing.
yeah, I'm
your knees
just
should be
talking
moving.
literally in general. When
But
you're
yeah,
talking
it
about
usually
deadlift, talking about like pressing, talking about squat, all of them, your spine should be neutral, and you should be like driving in your heel, keeping your foot flat.
Yep, exactly. For
That's like
a lot, especially lower
two
body
things.
movements, have so many similarities. Things that are like mediated by the hips. Like you're seeing a lot of the same patterns. But you know, if you're just kind of like watch an athlete, avoiding things that just look ugly.
Cringy, yes.
Cringy.
I agree.
Make
I
you feel
agree.
like, oh, that spine is going to shoot out of the back of somebody's back, or oh man, like they're really on their toes. I feel like their kneecaps are going to explode.
Yes.
Like you can usually tell, but you know, the range of motion, honestly, in a lot of cases, you know, people can become ego lifters. They just want to, because they're trained into like that number on the whiteboard. Like I want the heaviest back squat in the class, so I'll, you know, do whatever it takes, even if it means moving ugly or not getting the range of motion. But oftentimes maybe reducing the weight and just trying to move pretty more consistently and accumulating quality repetitions over long periods of time is the difference.
Yes.
Where it's like a step back to be able to take 2 or 3 steps forward.
Yeah, I was talking literally like 2 days ago. I was doing another podcast, and we just kind of got into like how people have lost the ability to master the foundation. And like we see this everywhere, where like they'll barely touch the foundational movement, and then they'll go straight on into adding complexity and intensity.
Yep.
But like we really need to master those, like knowing how to squat properly, knowing how to deadlift properly, knowing how to press properly. But that also goes on the coaching side, like just understanding the body, like the basic notion that goes with the body.
And I'll be the first one to say that, like at Thunderbro, we use a lot of movements that don't use the full range of motion.
Oh yes,
because there's benefit there,
yes.
right? But before we start adding more bar on bar, everybody should have a good full functional range of motion for a muscle to fully lengthen and shorten. And we'll get into the context of like, you know, where you might use that more in training versus less in training. And really what we're referring to here is like positioning and patterning you're seeing in the movement. So for those of you guys out there, if you're hitting a plateau, maybe drop the weight down and just try to move pretty more frequently. And you'd be surprised how a lighter weight that, you know, may have seemed really easy for you before can be really challenging when you're really focusing on just moving with perfection. And that can add great muscular balance, orthopedic safety. It really sets you up for success.
Yes. The other thing I would like to add onto this, I feel like a lot of people at home, they're like, I don't know if this is a good program. I don't know if what I'm doing is right. And if you really want to like work on purpose with purpose, like for example, I love going to the gym and knowing exactly why I'm doing something, because that way, when I do that piece of training, I have the goal in my head. Like I know what is the purpose of this. Am I going heavy? Am I trying to, you know, get my heart rate up? Am I trying, like, what really am I trying to do? Am I trying to get in my butt? Am I trying to get in my quad? And if you're not sure what you're doing, ask your coach.
Yep, that's
and
so
if
important.
your coach is not able to answer you, that's a red flag.
So this is a shift now. We're no longer talking about just like the mechanics of the movement, the way that you're doing it, which is really important. So to give you guys an example, like at Thunderbro, what we do is, yes, they're getting trained, but they're also getting a lot of education where
Yes.
every exercise is labeled with a principle. So there are pieces in every workout that are like heavy mechanical loading, where they know, hey, the goal is heavy. And then there's stuff where there's concentration work, where they know, okay, we're trying to get like slow
Yes.
contractions with mind-muscle
And we do
connection.
time under tension.
Time under
and
tension,
speed,
you're just
and,
trying to hold
yeah.
on to the weight as long as you possibly can, or metabolic stress, where you're just trying to push as much blood as
Yep.
possible. But looking at the details of those principles, you start to notice some things where, like, hey, you know, you're not just back squatting, but it's like a 3-second negative
Yeah.
or a partial into a full rep. And it's not necessarily the movement that you're doing, but how you're executing it and the way you're challenging muscles in a different way beyond just the load,
Yes.
to be able to maintain control, or, you know, do whatever it is that you're trying to kind of target.
Yes.
And a lot of athletes will only look at the weight as their metric for whether
Yes.
they're executing it properly, where if you kind of think about the principles are there for a reason, because they work, and for most people, because they're different, because they haven't been training that way. So you have to get uncomfortable in a way that you're not normally accustomed to, and a lot of times that means moving much slower or much lighter,
Yes.
or you know, not just focusing on the load, but focusing on the way that you're moving that load.
Yes. Sadly, I think a lot of the program out there, they just are not giving that to the athlete. I know both me and you are obsessed. Like, and when we program, there's this like big description under each section that we're giving them the purpose. We're giving them exactly why we're doing this, because I want to make sure they're doing it right, but also I want to make sure that they know that I care so much about what they're doing at the gym. Like, in my head, I'm like trying to hold their hand even though I'm far away. Now, I think where it gets hard is it can be the best program in the world, but if there's no explanation of why they do things for what, I think that it becomes very hard for the athlete to just like trust.
Yep.
Like, if I just write 5x10 back squat, like either they are gonna go to maybe a sub weight that wasn't my intention for them to do, or they're gonna go too heavy and ugly. Like,
And
I
that's what's so
need
hard.
to help them. Like,
That's what's so hard about online training, because
Yes.
the coach is not physically there with them in
Yeah.
the gym. They're all getting the program. So the only thing we can do is try to give them as much direction as we
Yes.
possibly can, and be able to interact with them. And I think this is changing. We're seeing more coaches pay attention
Yes.
in the functional fitness realm to like contractile speed. But it's much more than
Yes.
contractile speed too, because what we'll do is we'll create new ways to kind of combine methods to make it more awful. So
Yes.
as an example, like, we have a complex where we do high rep sissy squats, which is like a very quad dominant squat. And we do these nice and fast, just 3/4 rep ranges of
Yep.
motion from the bottom to
Stay
halfway
under
up.
tension.
And we label that, hey, that's metabolic stress. You want to feel blood getting pushed in
Yeah.
your legs. You want to feel your legs burning. And then they'll go immediately into super slow, heavy 12 rep back squats, where they're moving 3 seconds down and 3 seconds up. And they know that is about heavy mechanical loading.
Yeah.
They want them to go as heavy as they can while moving slowly. And
Yeah.
that's where you start to see like legs really
Yes.
trembling. And you couldn't get that effect, alone, that kind of compounding effect
Yeah.
and I think that's where we're unique in our training methods, is we really use a lot of these different principles to be able to create new stimulus for
Yes.
growth and adaptation. But the big point is, it's not just what you're doing, but it's how you're doing it that can make a
and
huge
why?
difference.
Yes. The last thing I wanted to say real quick, and then we'll move on from this, is I think one of the mistake about like not being precise enough in what you're programming, you might program a workout or something, and it can be done like 100 different ways.
Yep.
So like, if you give, I don't know, like a high intensity workout or this or that, you can have someone who decide to go like, I'm going to work for 20 seconds and rest for 10. Then you can have someone who's just going to go steady all the way through. Or you can have someone who starts way too hard and is going to crash. And you can have someone who starts slow and then is going to speed up. But all of those have different impact on
Yeah.
how like the body responds to the training. So understanding ahead of time what you're trying to get out of your training or why you're doing this is so key, and then really being able to achieve that training on purpose with purpose.
And you know, Camille and I have had the chance to work with some of the world's like foremost
Best.
hypertrophy
So
experts.
lucky.
And one thing that I've noticed about great coaches that understand muscle hypertrophy is it's not about a set rep range or load. Like a great coach will just be able to watch you.
Listen with
And
your
they're
eyes.
they're listening with their eyes, and they're watching you, and they're looking for that alarm state where, oh, your legs are starting, the movement's really starting to slow down, and then they're able to squeeze 2 or 3 more reps, and it's those 2 or 3 more really hard, challenging reps where you're just flirting with failure in a controlled environment that be able to make the difference.
100%.
So because we're not there and able to actually do that in person with the athletes, one thing that we've incorporated into our online program is the form check feature. So what athletes can do, and every program has like a private Facebook group, I know you have the same thing too, is any athlete in our Muscle Anarchy program can go and make a post in our private Facebook group. They just title it form check, and they put their video of the complex, and we can look at both their mechanics, how they're doing it, but also the way that we're doing that so that they can better understand the concepts, because the concepts, the principles are really where the magic is at.
Really,
okay.
Yes. Our goal is just to be there for them as much as we can.
So let's
all right, top mindset
shift.
tool. You seem to really know yours that you wanted to share. I have 5 million, so why don't we start with yours?
Okay, well, first,
and I want to make sure I'm not going to repeat what you're saying.
Mindset can be a really kind of fluffy, crunchy category for people, you know, because it is kind of like, well, mental wellness, and then you've got the performance aspect, and for me, I mean, they're all kind of interrelated, but I always think about like, how do I get the most out of myself? For myself and for the people around me.
I think for me, mindset tools are literally like, this is me being my little engineer self. For me, mindset tools are literally like tools that have been scientifically proven to help you reach like better goal and better state.
Our friend Justin Sua, who's a great mental skills coach.
He's the best.
And he's like a resident with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's done so many great things with athletes, but he has an awesome podcast called Increase Your Impact. And just that phrase alone really nails it for me.
Yeah.
When someone talks to mindset about me, I'm like, how do I increase my impact and get more out of myself? And I can tell you, I know what happens when I'm not doing that. You know, when I feel like I'm in quicksand, like I'm getting nowhere.
Yes.
And typically, this will be triggered by some kind of event that is an obstacle, right?
Yeah.
A setback, an injury, you know, whatever. Something went wrong. The website crashed. We hit a dead end.
Yeah.
And I tend, like a lot of people, to focus on what I can't do.
Yes.
Right? I'm like, oh, my thing's hurt. I can't do this. I can't do that. Like with my back was a great example. For years. I was so bummed out because I couldn't do all these things with my back. And what I didn't consider is, number one, that doesn't help me to focus on what I can't do or what I no longer have. But really to maybe shift that focus to what I do have and what I can do, because that gives me a sense of relief in that I feel like no matter how long or how hard it takes, at least I'm getting somewhere.
Yes.
Even if it's slow, even if it's hard. So my number one mindset tool for people, for productivity, for feeling like you're moving in the right direction, or avoiding circular thinking where you just kind of keep going over whatever that bad thing is again, is to make a list.
Uh-oh.
And
where
Kelly's
did
laughing.
you learn that from?
I learned that from Camille. And I'll be the first to admit, when things are going good, sometimes I forget to make lists. And I'm just like freestyling. But when things do get hard.
And then you get to a point that you're like,
when the shit hits the fan and it's really time to be like, okay, well, what can you do?
Yeah.
Boom. The list is the GPS. It's your way out. And the more frequently you can do it, you're going to feel like you like, we keep on saying these things, but you're living on purpose with purpose. You're knocking things off the list, a sense of accomplishment, a feeling like you're getting somewhere, and a sense of continuity, because without a plan, you plan to fail. And so for me, it's that simple act of, you know, at the end of the night, before you go to bed for the next day, when you're all stressed out about this, that, and the other thing, instead of just sitting in bed and thinking about all the shit that went wrong, make a list. You'll sleep better, get up in the morning, and start crossing shit off. Even if it's small stuff. Even if it's like, take Zoe to school.
Oh, I think the small stuff in the list is the most important thing.
And it's nice to pick easy things.
And that sounds like insane, because when you look at it in like the sense of like achieving your goal, it doesn't seem to be the big thing. It's not like the meat and potato. But what the small things do is that it gets the ball rolling.
Yes.
It gives you wins. So if like on your list, your first thing is like, drink my coffee in the morning, and you always drink your coffee in the morning, you just gotta win.
And that creates momentum, right?
Yes,
you feel like
and you're like
winning.
crossing it up and get that little serotonin dip in your brain. You're like, I'm awesome, let's keep going. And then you get to that stuff that you've been dreading, but at that point you've been on a roll, and you've been like so amazing that you just like get ahead and keep going.
The mental difference between thinking that you're winning and leading from the front, as opposed to falling behind and trying to chase somebody, is completely different. And it's important. One thing I realize is, like, when you do make these lists, make them small, achievable things.
Yes.
So it shouldn't be like build the website, but it should be stuff like purchase the URL today.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
Because that way it's achievable.
Answer 3 emails.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, what's yours, Cam?
Oh boy. Okay. So let me think. So this is one that I really like, and it's very simple, but every action that you make fires the synapse in your brain in a certain way, and the more you do something, the easier that like firing becomes. With that being said, for example, if I am creating a new habit, that new habit is going to be hard at first, and it's not going to feel natural, and it's going to feel like it takes effort. Well, just know that every time you make that better choice, literally in your brain, it becomes easier and easier and easier to make that choice. And that's been something that I always keep in the back of my head, especially when faced with hard choice.
Do you have an example of one of those types of actions that, like, at first it was hard for you and now it's just like part of your habits, part of who you are?
I think, like, for me, like food.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
Food is like definitely like something that's been really hard. And part of it is how I've been raised. I haven't been raised in an environment that I was shown what the healthy relationship with food was. There was a lot of like priving us of food, and then kind of like I would see like literally my parents like go nuts when like there was sugar, and we never could eat sugar, so everyone would go nuts. So when I became an adult and it was like I had access to it.
So when there was food available, you would binge.
Yes, and it was also the type of thing when we would eat for, dinner time, you couldn't leave the table until your plate was done. So it became like kind of this weird thing in my head that like my plate had to be done, otherwise I would like get yelled at. So, I mean, that took me years, and I still struggle with it sometimes, but it's like this conscious like moment that I have to make that choice of, I am feeling full, my plate isn't done, like what do I do?
Yeah.
And it's like being okay, I'm done, let's put it away. And the more I do that,
and you're very like right
easier-
brain, you're very linear. Like if there's a you have to you have to go all the way to the line. Like there's no freestyling with you.
well, that's I guess another type of those choice
Yeah.
that is very important to me is you have to finish what you start.
So-
Unless it's like, unless the path is not going where it should be going, which I've learned to be more flexible about it. But especially in order, I think, to become the fittest on earth and finish my chemical engineering degree, like I would like kind of make myself those goals. Like, okay, you have to study this full chapter.
Can I pause you there for a second? Because I want to talk about those two things you mentioned, being the fittest on earth and getting your chemical engineering degree. Because for people that are listening out there, they're like, oh, I want to do this hard thing, so I'll just do it, and I'll try to stay dedicated to it, and it'll just kind of magically become a habit. But the truth is, number one, you have to really want it. Right? Like there are things, just me knowing you as well as I know you, okay, the idea of determination, right, is this unstoppable gravity towards achieving your goal, right? And so when it comes to you will do whatever it takes to get that chemical engineering degree. I mean, we did it. We commuted
We
back
did
and forth
do
from
it, whatever
California
it took to get it,
Canada
yes.
to do it, right? We went to extreme lengths. For the CrossFit Games, we absolutely did it. We exhausted every possible resource, and we did all these things that were really hard. But without that desire and sense of desperation, I don't know that you would have done those things. So for those of you guys out there,
Well,
I think it's important to ask
think-
yourself, do you really want this?
I think it's I don't see it necessarily in the desperation side, because I think for me it was more of a like having no jig. So just jig, or just in case.
No excuses.
No excuses.
You burned the ships. There was no
Yes.
turning back.
And it was like being very curious into what can I accomplish if I really, really 100% try to do everything right.
I think a lot of times it just is coming down to,
And that
hey, the idea-
became discipline, and that also is like right back in line with those choice. And we used to do that all the time. Like I would be eating, I would reach out for the cookie, and they would be, is this in line with what you're trying to achieve? And I would take the cookie and throw it at him and be like, darn it! But it was perfect.
I've talked about this before with people,
but
Cameron,
yes.
where like you really have to be honest with yourself, and I could,
Oh,
you could say this in a lot of different
100%,
ways.
yes.
But for you, it's like, does the pain of discipline, right, or on being uncomfortable, or whatever it is, does that bother you less than the pain of not doing yourself justice?
Oh, not even that. For me, one of the things that I am the most scared in the world, and that's why I'm like, I don't think it's desperation for me. I am so scared to regret.
Yeah.
That for me is like, because when you regret, you didn't even try.
And
I
oftentimes-
would much rather fail on my freaking face
Yep.
a million times than be one of those persons sitting at home saying, oh, I could have or should have. Well, you didn't.
Have you ever had the experience of like, that thing that felt so hard the first time, and then after you've been doing it for a while and it becomes a habit, you look back and you're like, I don't know what I was making such a fuss about. It's not that bad. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just because it's different and you got to retrain
It's
yourself.
a synapse.
It's so funny you said food,
It's
because
a
when
synapse.
you were talking about that, I was thinking about like, how long it took me to like weigh and measure food. And I was like, weigh and measure, that's ridiculous. Now it's like, or food prep on my own.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. I really don't know how else to do things now.
It's not only that, it's literally any new habit. It feels hard at first, but when we look back, they are so beneficial to our life and really help us optimize everything else, that the idea now of not doing those things is so silly.
Yep. And a lot of times, I'll be honest, it's true for myself. I think it's true for you too. And a lot of people out there, a lot of times, frankly, guys, we're just big fucking babies. We're big babies. We're like, this is hard and yada, yada. And I just ask yourself, like, who's talking in your head? Is that the adult version or the child version of yourself? Like, this is hard. I'm making an excuse. I can't do it, this and that. And the adult version is saying, hey, you got this. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
That's it. And
Well,
so
sometimes I need a hug.
yeah, exactly.
It's okay.
Oh man, but you're adults, so pay
But
attention
those
to
are
who's talking in your head.
yes, but I also think those are important. I feel like unless sometimes we look at ourselves and like, hey, you're being soft. I feel like if you don't have the soft versus the hard, it's hard to know where you're at.
There's a time and a place.
Like perspective is everything. So if things have always been easy, anything is going to be hard. But if everything is hard, then
Yes.
it's hard to know what is supposed to be easy.
It's a
so
lot of
having
context.
both is yes.
Yeah, and that's why I tell you,
always,
like when we complain about things, sometimes I think about just how supremely lucky we
But
are.
even now,
We got 1 minute.
Yes.
Let's talk about our 10-year wedding anniversary. It was wonderful. We went to Disney. We had the first time alone
The best
for the
time.
night
It was
without the baby.
amazing.
And it was so fun to
It
I
was
felt
the
like I was
best time.
reconnecting with you as
Yeah.
we just went on rides and had fun together. It reminded me of like when we first started dating. So we talked a little bit about, after 10 years, what's your biggest takeaway?
Oh, if there's love, there's a way. Because it's hard. It's really hard. We've been through so many hardships.
A lot of hard things, a lot of great things.
Hard things that like could destroy a relationship, and we always came back to, do we love each other, and are we willing to change and grow?
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask yourself hard questions. You're willing to grow. You're gonna have to check your ego, let go of your pride sometimes, and understand that it's all about building a life together.
Thanks for being here. See you.